Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is a course in American government. This lesson is from Unit 10 about media and politics. It's Lesson 5 about how online news is different from other news sources. In this lesson, you'll learn about on-demand media, interactive media, unfiltered media, and self-segregating media. In the previous lesson, we talked about online news sites, and we discussed different varieties of them that can be found and what they do. In this lesson, we'll talk about how online news differs from traditional news sources, like newspaper and television news programs. There are several ways in which online news is different. In this lesson, we're going to discuss 4 of those differences in particular. The first difference is that online news is on demand. Now, with technology changes, some other news is becoming on demand also, such as you can have a DVR attached to your TV to watch an evening news program at another time of your choosing. But even with that, other news sources are not as much on demand as online news sources are. For example, online websites, news websites, can be accessed through multiple devices, which allows you to take them with you. You can be accessing these news sites while you're sitting on the beach under an umbrella, out on a tropical island somewhere. You can access them day or night, reading the same stories. You don't have to follow the schedule that the traditional news sources may have for you. If there's a particular radio program that you like, you may have to listen to it at a particular time of day. But with online media, you can listen to something like that as a podcast when you want to. So in these ways, online news sources are more accessible than traditional news sources are. A second way that online news sources differ is that they are potentially interactive. Most online news sources provide some sort of comment section where you can contact the person who wrote the story, contact the news provider in general, let them know your opinion of what you've been reading or seeing or hearing from them. Traditional news sources didn't provide this. I remember as a child once seeing my father take off his shoe and throw it at the TV. He was so mad about what somebody had said on the news. Well, the person who was on the news speaking that he threw the shoe at had no idea that he threw his shoe. But with modern online interactive media, you can leave a comment for somebody if you don't like what they said, or if you do like what they said, you can compliment them. And they are actually obsessive about going back and reading those comments to find out what you think. In that way, viewers can have an influence on the people who are creating the news now. A third way that online news differs from traditional news sources is that it has the potential for being unfiltered. An example of that are tweets sent out by Donald Trump when he was running for president. He decided to, in a sense, cut out the middleman of the news media entirely and reach out to potential voters directly. Because his tweets were oftentimes controversial and caught people's attention, this is a very effective mechanism for him. But it's just an example of how he was able to get his message to people without it being sliced down, edited, interpreted, whatever it may be by the media. He could contact people directly. Well, this can be used in other bigger ways too. For example, let's say a politician gives a long speech, a speech lasting half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that. When it gets talked about on the news, if it even does get talked about on the news, they'll only spend a minute on it. And of that minute, they'll maybe play 15, 20 seconds of the politician actually speaking. Well, that isn't the entire content of the talk. And so we are left not knowing everything that was discussed by the politician if we simply learn about the speech on the news. But with modern interactive online technology, we can actually access the entire talk if we want to. So maybe we read a story and it gives us a little taste of what the person said, but we want to know more. There are ways that then we can click on and find out the entire speech. Listen to every word of it if that's what we want to do. This is something that traditional media could not provide. Another way that online media is different is that it is self-segregating. Now, this can be seen in the example of the difference between the online news networks, Fox News and MSNBC. Fox News is generally conservative in its point of view. MSNBC is generally liberal in its point of view. And so what happens is people who are looking for online cable news will sometimes, in fact quite often, choose which channel they tune into based on their own biases. So if they're conservatives, they'll turn on Fox News. If they're liberals, they'll turn on MSNBC. There was a time when these kind of choices weren't available to people, where there was, for example, at one point there were only 4 television stations, and you kind of watched whatever was on from them. Now we have more choices. Well, these choices that I show here at the example of cable news are even greater with the internet. You can get much more specific about what your interests are. Not just conservative, but you can zero in on a particular issue that you think is important, say gun rights. Or not just liberal, but zero in on a particular issue that's important to you, such as abortion rights. And you can go to a website that focuses on that thing that you find particularly interesting. But in this way, people divide themselves up. They segregate, in other words. They go to those places that they find are interesting and potentially ignore other ones. Online news has made this possible for people to become focused and go to those areas that they find most interesting. This, however, leads to what are sometimes called echo chambers. People are so careful about choosing the sites that they go to that they end up going places where all they hear are the exact things that they already believe themselves. And so rather than getting any of their beliefs challenged, they simply get all their beliefs confirmed. These are called echo chambers because the basic idea is whatever they say, they hear coming right back at them. And so because they self-segregate and go out places where they get all their beliefs confirmed, they end up just being that much more sure that they are right, rather than having an opportunity to hear other points of view. Now let's review what we've learned in this lesson. What is meant by online news being on demand? Does it mean that you can access what you want when you want? Does it mean that you can talk with the people who are producing the news? Does it mean that you can receive the entire message rather than just part of the message that politicians were delivering? Or does it mean that you can avoid content that you don't want to be exposed to? When we say that news is on demand, we mean that you can access it when you want it and access what you want. What is meant by online news being interactive? Does that mean you can access something when you want? Does it mean that you can talk to the people who produce the news? Does it mean that you can receive the entire message from politicians? Or does it mean that you can avoid unwanted content? Online news being interactive means that you can talk with the people who produce the news. Now, maybe they'll respond back, maybe they won't, but at least you can get a message to them, letting them know what you think of what they did. What is meant by online news being unfiltered? Does that mean that you can access what you want, or that you can talk to the people that produce the news, or that you can receive the entire message from politicians, or that you can avoid unwanted content? Well, but as one example, it means that you can receive the entire message, such as my example of a politician giving a long speech and the news only giving you a few seconds of it. With the internet, you can go find the entire speech and listen to it if that's what you want. What is meant by online news being self-segregating? Does it mean that you can access what you want, that you can talk with the producers, that you can receive the entire message, or that you can avoid unwanted content? Self-segregation means that you can avoid unwanted content. You can stay away from things that you disagree with and only go to sources that completely confirm what you think you already believe, if that's what you want to do. What is meant by online news being an echo chamber? Does it mean that most websites are empty? Does it mean that websites send too many mixed messages? Does it mean that there's so much clutter no one can be heard? Or does it mean that people go to sites that they agree with? Online news being an echo chamber means that people go to sites that they agree with, and then just hear the very same beliefs that they already have echoed back to them. That completes this lesson. The next lesson will also be from Unit 10. It'll be Lesson 6, in which we will discuss media imperatives.